Welcome Wargamers, Doug here from 2 Plus Stuff, and today I am hanging out and doing a rare White Dwarf review. I actually have two of these in mind right now because this edition, issue 506, is super loaded with all kinds of awesome content for us Age of Sigmar fans, particularly if you are any kind of Duardin player, whether that's Kharadron Overlords, Fyreslayers, or the Dispossessed from Cities of Sigmar, or if you are an Ossiarch Bone Reaper fan. So I have another video for them coming out soon. Be sure to check that out as well. But in this video, we're going to explore that first option, a new Army of Renown that combines all of the units from Fyreslayers, again, Kharadron Overlords, and Dispossessed keyworded units from the Cities of Sigmar. They're brought together by a single titular character, Grombrindal, the White Dwarf himself, which has to be included in your army, but essentially he is what makes it possible for everyone to be united. Before we jump into that real quick, let me know if you enjoy these videos, because normally I don't always grab a White Dwarf. I had a subscription and it was super spotty with delivery, and then my local store, sometimes they just get either gobbled up before I can get a hold of them or whatever. So let me know if you like this, because I'll do more in the future. I'll just make an effort to actually go reserve a copy. And here we go, issue 506. And as you can see, there's a picture of the cover if you're looking to grab it on eBay. Got a couple of really cool Space Marines chopping up some Tyranids. I love it. So this one is actually super jam-packed if you are also a 40k player. It's one of their bunker issues where they have like a whole ton of different supports for them. We're going to flip all the way to the back here, to the section entitled The Duarding Ascendent. Now, they have some lore here, but I'm going to put that in quotes. Essentially, each entire faction gets a single paragraph. And then the Grombrindal section is just like, he's a super happy dude who just goes around collecting whatever dwarves he can and turns them into an army. And that is the extent of the lore. There's, I mentioned the Ossiarch Bone Reapers. They actually have like a cool lore entry. There is nothing for the Dwarf. And they're just like, enjoy your rules. Don't ask for anything else. And I love the energy. Now, all of this, like I said, there's really nothing here new. If you want to know about these, please go see my playlists on the various factions. And right here in the bottom right is a new war scroll for Grombrindal, the White Dwarf himself. Now, I want to come back to this in a second, but we're going to take a quick glance just to get a sense, okay? Got a 4-inch move, 8 health, 2 control, and a 4-up save. All right, he's a small little dude. Rune Axe of Grimnir, 5 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, 2 rend, and 3 damage. The ability is crits 2 hits, so I mean 3 damage with a crit 2 hit, that's fantastic. Is a passive ability Armor of Glimril Scales. If this unit would be automatically destroyed, it is not automatically destroyed. Instead, allocate D3 damage points to it, which we've seen for important heroes, so they don't just get iced really quickly by a certain ability. Passive next to that also as well, a Stern as Stone effect. Friendly Duardin infantry units have a ward 5 up while they're wholly within 12 of this unit, and he himself, jumping ahead, has a ward of a 3 up. He is going to be a tanky little guy. He has a passive combat ability, the Rune Axe of Grimnir. The attacks characteristic of this unit's Rune Axe of Grimnir is 7 if it charged in the same turn. So you go from 5 to 7 with a turn you charge into combat. Again, brutal on a 2 crit. On a crit 2 hit effect weapon. And lastly, a passive ability, Living Legend. Add 2 to the control score of friendly Duardin infantry units while they are wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Again, gives them a 5-up ward and control bonus. Fantastic. I feel like those two could have been the same rule, but here we are. You could have just said give them a 5-up ward and increase their control score by 2. Moving forward, he's a unique hero infantry. He has a ward of a 3-up, like we said before, and his keywords are Order and Duardin. He costs 360 points. I'll spoil this much for the rules. He is a must include to be able to play this Army of Renown. So your list building starts at least this much of a deficit. Regiment options. Any Order Duardin. Now, it's very important. If you are the player of one of those little sub-factions, your brain is probably going wild as you try to incorporate him into what kind of units can do well without your allegiance abilities. So, put that into perspective. We come now to the main page, the one that has most of the rules for him. Warhammer Legends, Army of Renown, the Duarding Ascendant. When you pick the Fyreslayers, Kharadron Overlords, or Cities of Sigmar faction for your army, you can choose it to be a Duarding Ascendant Army of Renown. If you do so, Use the faction rules on these pages instead of the Fyreslayers, Kharadron Overlords, and Cities of Sigmar rules. Every unit in your army must be drawn from the unit lists in the organization below. All your units in your army gain the Duarding Ascendent keyword. So that's your faction keyword, is Duarding Ascendant. Okay, so our roster options. Grombrindal must be included and must be your general, without question. But then below him, any Order Duardin units. I like this freedom. This is a good one. Roster rules, you cannot include regiments of renown, you can't have manifestations, and you cannot have faction terrain. That's all perfectly reasonable, I think. So this truly, starting off, before we go any further into battle traits, just in terms of army composition, if you have any Duardin units whatsoever, you have access to this, just by its nature. You're going to have restrictions, obviously, with any Duardin Order units when it comes to the Cities of Sigmar stuff. It blocks out most of that book, but a lot of those units are fantastic on their own. So we're going to explore that a bit. You get these rules instead of the army rules that you have. So if you're playing Fyreslayers, you don't get the rune abilities. If you're doing KO, I actually can't remember, honestly, if I'm totally transparent with you what their army rule is. I haven't seen anyone play them in a long time. I gotta go do a refresh course on that. But my point being of, like, you lose your army rules and then this becomes your new trait. So we have a few rules here. First one is a passive, Duardrin. Grombrindal's goal is no less than the reunification of all scattered noble Duardin nations. The effect: friendly Duardin Ascendant units are unified while they are wholly within 12 inches of at least one Fyreslayer, one Kharadron Overlords, and one Cities of Sigmar Duardin unit. I'm going to tell you this, unified is a fantastically powerful ability for this. And what it's doing is simply rewarding you for integrating the different factions. Now, I will say it doesn't say any specific kind of unit. A single solo hero who does well on their own and doesn't need more support, or is just, able to be defensive, whatever that looks like, whatever, negative modifiers to hit or whatever they have. However it can look, you can just have a single, say, gyrocopter counts as a Cities of Sigmar Duardin unit. So, all right, but you have to mingle them up, and the unified moniker or effect keyword, it becomes very important. So that's your passive. That's your big one. We're moving down to the hero phase. Once per turn, army-wide, as the ancestors intended. To stand with far-flung kin in hours of crisis bolsters every Duardin preacher. Declare. Pick a friendly unified Duardin Ascendant priest to be the target. Add 1 to chanting rolls for the target for the rest of the turn. So again, if you happen to have a priest who can be a solo person in that mix of the 3 and they're all unified, you pick him, boom, bonus to chanting rolls. Fyreslayers have incredible priests. Sadly, you don't get a chance to use their manifestations from their endless spells, but they do have some killer ones themselves. The next one is once per turn army-wide in your shooting phase. Pah, now this is a shot. Duardin gunners of every creed never miss an opportunity to show their superior craft before their kin. Pick a friendly unified Duardin Ascendant infantry to be the target. So again, unified infantry. Add 1 to the attack's characteristic of that target's ranged weapons for the rest of the turn. Okay. 1 unit per turn, provided you can keep a bunch of them unified, can do this. This is incredible. Literally any KO cannon. Fantastic. Auric Hearthguard, which I think are the ranged magma shooter dudes. I might be wrong on that. They all sound the same to me. I'm so sorry. But those guys, the magma pike dudes from the Fyreslayers, fantastic. Weight of dice is in your favor when it comes to any Duardin shooting units that come out of Cities of Sigmar. It is just wonderful. I think an obvious one is KO. Kharadron Overlords have just a lot of different kinds of gun profiles. So finding the combo that you think could benefit from +1 attack, I mean, there's literally nothing in the game that doesn't, but that's an interesting one. Once per turn, army-wide in your charge phase, the rule is, as one kinfolk, the children of the ancestor gods surge across the field as one mighty throng. Declare, pick up to 3 friendly unified Duardin Ascendant infantry units to be the targets. And the effect is, for the rest of the turn, add 1 to the number of dice rolled when making charge rolls for the target to a maximum of 3. So if you want to get your guys in there, pick up to 3 units. They all add a die to their charge roll up to 3. Oh man, that's incredible. That is incredible. These little dudes doing the truffle shuffle are going to be able to yeet themselves real good. And then next to that is the once per turn army-wide in any combat phase, settle every grudge, Kazook. When fighting as one, the Duardin are red-handed force of raw vengeance. Declare, pick a friendly unified Duarding Ascendant infantry unit to be the target. Add 1 to the attacks characteristic of the target's melee weapons for the rest of the turn. So it's the exact same thing as the shooting phase one, but in combat. And again, Fyreslayers have some wonderful blenders. I know there's at least one of the hammerers in the Cities of Sigmar that are really gross when you just buff them right. So fantastic. And what I like about this, if you think about it, the way they've written it out, friendly units are unified while they are wholly within 12 inches. So what that doesn't mean that you have to be unified at the top of the turn. Let's say that you're not unified in your hero phase here, but in the movement phase, you then position yourself for a big charge or something like that, then you are going to be unified in the charge phase. So it's a thing that you can gain and lose moment to moment, which ends up in your favor as there are ways to move your infantry, and you do have some fast options, especially when it comes to Kharadron Overlords, again, gyrocopters, that kind of thing. Because the first time I read it, I was like, okay, I misinterpreted it as you become unified at your hero phase and they stay that way, but instead it's just like a turn-to-turn, phase-to-phase thing. It's going to make abilities like redeploy to be super important for hopefully pulling units into that range. Just be careful if you rally and restore models to a unit that you are able to keep the unit wholly within 12 inches of whatever you need it to be. That's the caveat. We're going to move on to the heroic traits, which I think are super interesting. What I like about these is they don't give you any choices. They lock you into a specific one. And so our hero trait is tireless purpose. Sorry, y'all, I've tried like 9 positions. I cannot get that glare off that section of the paper here. Tireless purpose. Effect. Each time a friendly Duarding Ascendant infantry unit wholly within 12 inches of this unit uses the normal move ability, add 2 to the distance of that unit can move as part of that ability. So, your heroic trait, that's awesome. So around your chosen hero, you're able to, relative in Duardin terms, slingshot people out. By that I mean they move at the speed that everybody else basically moves, but it's important for setting up your lines and, like I said, positioning. A lot of the traits and stuff like that we explored are just all about positioning, and so anything that gives you movement options is inherently good. It's just funny that all that does is bring them up to the same stride that like everybody else has. Your artifact of power for a hero in general, once per battle in your hero phase. It's known as the Valayan Hearth Banner. Wrought in the image of she who guards the hold and hearth, this runic standard is a salve to even the most severe wounds for those who believe. Declare, pick each friendly unified Duarding Ascendant unit on the battlefield to be the targets. Effect, heal D3 target, or for each target. Okay, and you know what? She doesn't even have to have, I say she because it's in reference to the banner, but this artifact does not require any line of sight. It is table-wide, consistently. Throw it on whoever you want to be in combat the least. But it is your way of getting a turn-wide, in your hero phase, healing. The only downside being that it's a banner and it's once per battle, but, it's a good one. Lastly is their prayer lore. Okay, the first prayer is the Spirit of the White Dwarf, goes off on a 4. Declare, pick a friendly Duarding Ascendant priest to chant this prayer. Pick a friendly Duarding Ascendant unit within 18 inches of them to be the target, and then make a chanting roll of d6. Effect. The target is unified until the start of your next turn. If the chanting roll was 8 or more, you can pick 2 units instead of 1. So this is important because while these other ones, like other units in your army, can come in and out of unified range, as it were, phase to phase, you are picking someone and you're saying, no. You're going to be like this until the next turn, which if you get double turned or, whatever, can be longer. But that's an important distinction, that you have a consistent unit to use all of these battle traits on. That's awesome. If the chanting roll was an 8+, you can pick 2 targets instead of 1. This immediately is like, if your opponent goes first, you're going to do the, the Arcane Interception or whatever, where you get to do a prayer. You're going to start building that up on your turn. Now you're in the driver's seat. Boom, now you can start delivering up to 2 unified tags that are going to stay with the units. That's fantastic. And it is unlimited. So, in a set of factions where you can bring multiple priests from all over the place, barring KO, that's a great ability to have. Remember, our unified keyword for the hero phase, or what that ability is it adds 1 to chanting rolls. So, like, you can get really, really good at these things. And the other prayer here is the Oath of Restoration. All that which once belonged to the Duardin will be theirs anew, so swear those who hold faith in Grombrindal. Declare, pick a friendly Duarding Ascendant priest to chant this prayer. Pick a visible objective within 18 inches of them that is contested by 2 or more unified units to be the target. And then make a chanting roll of a d6. Okay, so you have to point this guy at where the fight is thickest, right? Because you're going to have 2 units who are trying to contest an objective. Now, it could be a hero and, a armed guard with them, but they both have to be unified, which does make it a little complicated. Until the start of your next turn, friendly Duardin Ascendant units have a ward of a 6-up, while they have any models contesting the target. If the chanting roll was a 7 or more, friendly Duardin Ascendant units have a ward of 5-up. So again, you're targeting the objective, not the units. But it's where you have to have a few units at. It's not bad at all. You just have to make sure that you can keep, everybody unified. But if you can do that reliably, or, it's like maybe even a front that there's not a lot going on for, and you just want to like shore up defenses, it's a good one to do. That is it for the rules. That's all the rules that you get. The rest is dependent on the army building that you do, based on those 3 factions. So I'm going to throw some B-roll up here, and I'm going to just kind of wax poetically about some ideas that I had. So I kind of went through faction by faction and was just looking at the war scrolls, because again, that's kind of all the context you need or get. My immediate thought was that gyrocopters are an easy way to get the Cities of Sigmar Duardin keywords across the table. What I love about him specifically is that he's very easy to buff with the Cogsmith the more that you have. So if you're someone who's like, I'm not super interested in the Cities of Sigmar stuff, I really like, for example, my Kharadron Overlords, or I just want to have KO and Fyreslayers, I would go with the air patrol of Cities of Sigmar and gyrocopters to be able to meet the demands of the unified keyword. You can add some bits from the Kharadron Overlord vehicles and make them pretty stinking cool. And remember, heroes do count. So an Ether Chemist, a Rune Father on foot, and a Rune Lord all count specifically, or a gyrocopter count as their own keywords, so those 3 would be unified. The next character worth looking at is the Rune Lord. He's a great little priest, 1 guy for 120 points, plus he can take any Duardin units, obviously within Cities of Sigmar, but that gives him the most freedom when it comes to army construction. If you're just like, I just want a minimal force, have a captain and his guard, basically. The Warden King, if you want to kind of step up a little bit, invest, is sort of their melee champion, and he can actually take the Cogsmith unit in his regiment. He has an ability called Grudge Bearer, which is a buff for his forces. But what's great about it is that it's table-wide. So in this kind of movement-based thing where you're spreading your keywords around, your army doesn't have to be spread around, but you're trying to intermingle the units. Having something that like, I target all the Cities of Sigmar units and give them like an obvious buff. So if you're not familiar with Grudge Bearer, the way it works is you pick an enemy unit in your opponent's army and bear a grudge against them. You can pick an enemy unit that's in reserve, and for the rest of the battle, add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks by made of friendly Cities of Sigmar Duardin units that target that unit. So again, it's not army-wide because it affects everybody, it's army-wide because you pick 1 person and your whole army gets to bonus from it. Now, some honorable mentions here I'll throw out for units. I don't play Cities of Sigmar, so this is me just like looking over war scrolls. I'd love to, if you play cities, tell me your experience with Hammerers and Iron Drakes, because when I looked at the units that I think would either want to be contesting an objective to get that ward prayer benefit, benefiting from the charge, combat, or shooting abilities that are in this if you're unified, that sounds great. My overall thoughts to the cities options is I like the synergies there, and they seem really fun. If you want numbers, I think between this and the Fyreslayers are good places to go for it, of just like numbers of bodies on the table. But the problem is that most of their heroes are just tiny little dudes who die really easy this edition, at least right now. And so that's kind of the one caveat here. Next, I wanted to talk about the Fyreslayers, and in short, this is where the priest power is at. I cannot see anyone making a list for this army that doesn't at least have like a rune master or some rune priest of some kind. If you don't like this faction, you're like, I want the most minimal or whatever, do a rune master and have like a squad of Arc Hearthguard or something like that. Having priest 2 and a shooting attack like their magma pikes do in a faction that can give you +1 attack on your shooting, oh, that's so good. And again, your unlimited spell makes things unified. So having that sick priest, again, the Rune Master is a priest 2. It would not be hard to have him in the back as a leader with some other units to get him that hero phase +1 chanting rolls. Man, he's just good at it. Now, as a counterpoint, because he does suffer from being tiny and squishy like all of the city's heroes do, there are chunky heroes in this one as well, which are great, which are going to be your heroes on Magmadroth. If you want to double dip, you can get the Rune Smiter on Magmadroth, which gives you a priest 1. Personally, I'm of the persuasion that like none of the prayers require you to be like up in the enemy's face, so I would much rather have a fighty person on the fighty beast sending them to fight than have like another priest 1. We can get priests for pretty cheap. But also remember, he has runic empowerment where he can pick, Fyreslayer units, give them a small buff. So it just depends on the synergies you want to build towards. Now, if you are not super into Fyreslayers and you still want to run this army, I would like to introduce you to my personal hero, the Grimwrath Berserker. Yes, he is a small hero. But he's also a keyword for your abilities, so you can take the Fyreslayer keyword in a 12-inch bubble around him. And what's great about him is he requires absolutely no buffs or attention. He takes care of himself because he's a blender. Okay, he needs to move directly towards the biggest enemy that he can and just knock it out. Because even though he is a tiny little hero, it's kind of like a distraction ability or tactic. Like, your opponent can ignore him, but only at their own peril. Like, it is a disservice to their army to ignore the Grimwrath Berserker bearing down on you. And when you can, you can't spam them like you used to be able to, like just having one regiment of like 9 of them. But still, if you're like, I don't really like Fyreslayers, but you want to still have like the fun aspect of melee brawling or whatever, the Grimwrath Berserker delivers. Kit bash him to make him look like whatever. He's a fun dude. Him, a priest, and a unit of Arc Hearthguard or Berserkers, something like that. One fun note is the Grimwrath Berserker counts as a hero to trigger the Hearthguard abilities, and so they can act as a self-contained module. Basically, they get better as they're defending a hero, and he fills the niche there. So that could be its own little, pocket that goes off to war. Lastly are the Kharadron Overlords. Now, I'll be honest, like I said before, this is probably the faction I know the least about right now, and they've always been tough for me to wrap my head around because in a game of Sword and Shield, they chose Magic BB Gun. And so like the movement and the shooting and kiting and ranged attacks, it's just never been my style of gameplay. But in short, what the Kharadron Overlords offer this particular army, just by their war scrolls alone, is speed and shooting. Of course, the boats exist. The gunboats at their cheapest can do the same job I talked about with the gyrocopters, where they can just zip around the field at a higher speed and kind of move that Kharadron Overlord keyword around the board as needed to make sure things are unified. The Arcanaut Admiral can give +1 attack to his particular sky vessels that he has, and nothing about that seems to not stack with the the +1 ranged attack that you get from being unified, which I thought was nice. And also there's a hero called the Codewright, and I find him interesting simply because he doesn't have a range for his ability that he buffs people with. Essentially, once per turn in your hero phase, pick up to 3 visible friendly Kharadron Overlord units to be the targets, roll a die for each of them. On a 3-up, you pick one of the following effects, and the effects are things like add 2 to the target's control score, add 1 to run rolls and charge rolls, and the third one is no mortal damage is inflicted by retreating. So there are some very useful things there. It's not super dependable because you're still having to, roll a die for it, but he does add a lot of utility to units that otherwise wouldn't have access to it because you don't have spells or allegiance abilities, that kind of stuff. Battle traits that would do this instead. If you really are not a fan of the Kharadron Overlords and you want to keep it minimal, I honestly say just grab a Spearhead box. It is the perfect self-contained unit. You can kit bash them to whatever you want. The Admiral is a great hero for this setup, as we talked about it. You can add +2 attack to that heavy sky cannon you get with the ship. Frigate, I believe is what it's called, and it's just a good gun. And also he can transport the hero and the Arcanaut company around the board, dropping them off to fill in spaces in the line with the keyword. The balloon boys are fast enough to do whatever they want. They can actually do the gyrocopter thing of just zipping around the board to fill in keyword needs, but also I don't know if there's something I'm missing about their attack profile. They just seem like they hit like a wet pool noodle. Please comment if I am deeply mistaken. And also let me know, what would you go with in this case? Sky Wardens or, what are they? The Engineers or whatever they are. The hardest one, I think, to add, if you are someone who likes Fyreslayers and Kharadron Overlords, the Cities of Sigmar one, because they don't have a straight Duardin, starter set, spearhead, whatever, those purchases, you either have to already have them because you're a Cities player, or learn more about the War Scrolls and be a little bit selective. So that's just something to think about. And as far as my closing thoughts with this, I just want to say we need more content like this. The way that they designed the rules and the way they articulated how you build your army and stuff like that for 4th edition was done for this exact purpose, is my understanding. So that they have the freedom to let rules designers do structures like this, and they lend themselves to creativity, to just experimenting with fun rules that just are out there. Now, it's important to remember, Grombrindal is essential to this, and he is a Legends War Scroll, which means it's not going to be able to be used at official GW events, which, I want to clarify, that doesn't mean your local store. It just means you're not going to rock up to a competitive tournament with it. That said, if you are a Dwarf or Duardin enthusiast, this is a really funny idea for an army. And like I said, if you're careful with your purchases of Cities of Sigmar, I think you can do fairly well with just a spearhead box of the others. Like if you're just not into those factions, you can scrape by with just the bare entry. For example, I'm not the biggest Kharadron Overlords guy. It's just an army I struggle to wrap my head around. I enjoyed painting them for a project a while back, but like I don't really have an interest in collecting them. I'll grab the spearhead set just to paint something a little different and be able to put something new and fun on the table. And one thing I will say is I hope that they collate these Renown rules that they've been putting out into like an end of year compendium, whether it's digital or whatever. I just really think they should. That would definitely add a lot of content to Warhammer Plus, because it would be a shame to lose this. But anyway, friends, that is my thought on the Duarding Ascendant. Again, let me know your thoughts on content like this, if you like going through rules like this with me. I always am afraid that I'm a bit boring when I do, because I'm not a rules guy, but I see the potential of all these different, the variety of the different Duardin units all kind of working in unison, and I can see it sounds awesome. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and your suggestions as far as if you play one of those 3 Duardin factions, what do you suggest people take a look at from your particular faction? So if you're a Cities player and you're like, oh, I think, Hammerers are just absolutely amazing and underappreciated or whatever, tell me about it. I'll catch you in my next video. Thank you so much for listening, and happy wargaming.